On a sunny Wednesday evening in Seattle, Washington, three artists reunited with one of their former college professors. This was supposed to be an interview, but ultimately became a discussion on the history and function of art and design in our world. Sit down, and if possible, grab the beverage of your choice. This is Art 101 Revisited.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much the AIS model anyway. Actually, it's the what's it called? Educational Corporation or Education EMC. That's it.
Yeah.
EMC. That's their model everywhere.
Yeah. It's like two full-time faculty and like 40 adjuncts for every
It's interesting. When I was teaching there, I was adjunct in bits and pieces, and they started a new department, which is probably has grown into what you're teaching in now. And then, essentially, web design was a brand new thing, right? And it was designed for interactive media, I think is what it was called eventually. And I was the first full-time faculty they had, other than the head of the department. Which was, a good position to be in. And that was because, well, to a certain extent, all educational institutions are going to be a bit like this because there's such a pressure on having adjuncts rather than full-time faculty. And so you end up with people who are experts in a particular field, and that's good. Experts are necessary.
Right.
Unfortunately, you don't have any educators.
Yes, and that's exactly what
And as you have discovered if you've been teaching for 2 years, your skill set to be a good artist is not the same thing as a skill set to be a teacher.
I'm not a good teacher.
Any overlap of the two is a happy accident.
Yeah, absolutely a happy accident.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, art education, actually, and this is one thing I believe where the way that the DigiAppend degree was first set up was actually a strong point in that it made a point of having experts and educators. Right? It made a point of saying that what an expert can teach you is how they do something. But how they do something may or may not have any underlying principle that you can get a hold of. And I have one of my favorite examples of this is there was a student who was preparing some stuff for his portfolio, and he'd done a really nice 3D setup and image, and he was going to use just basically a still shot, and it was this rather cranky steampunk bride of Frankenstein, right? And she's got this big power drill, and she's got her arm on the bench, and she's drilling into her arm at an angle, right? And so the student had this picture, and he wanted to make it more dynamic.
Right.
So he Dutched the horizon. He basically turned the camera on the 3D model and took the picture. Now, the result of this was instead of drilling into her arm at an angle, she was drilling straight down. And suddenly, all of the drama, all the dynamic in the picture vanished. Because instead of having strong diagonal, it was all vertical. And he came and said, Professor, I don't understand what's going wrong here. And I said, okay, here's the problem, is if you go back to the original setup, you got this one nice strong diagonal. It's the diagonal that gives the drama, that gives the dynamic to it. Now I said, notice in the background you've got all these horizontals and verticals, which are the shelves and things in the background, and that's tying it down and making it steady. So what you want to do is you want to move your light source around so that it casts diagonal shadows off of these shells, and then you will get more strong diagonals running contrary to the angle that she's drilling in. And this is the point of all this. He knew that as a device, Dutching the camera produces a dramatic effect. But he didn't know why. All he knew was that trick worked, and when it didn't work, he didn't know what to do. Because he didn't understand the underlying principle that verticals and horizontals are stable and strong, and diagonals are unsteady and dynamic and dramatic.
Right. One metaphor I've heard to describe this before is that all the principles of art, they're not separate, they're connected, kind of like a woven tapestry.
Absolutely.
When you pull one cord, it kind of changes how everything else fits together. So you have to understand, like you said, you didn't understand why, and I think that why is really
and the
important.
why is what's very important. And to a certain degree, that was the real genius of Abbott. Abbott's real genius was the understanding that, like, you can have an underlying principles of fluid dynamics. You can have underlying principles of linguistics. You can have underlying principles of history even. You can have underlying principles of the English language. And there are underlying principles. There's a grammar of the way in which drawing works, the way in which making art works.
Absolutely.
And every one of the instances, like, Dutching the camera, or put a bit of color there, or whatever it might be, that an expert will tell you, do it this way, which is perfectly correct. All it does is it gives you an idea. It doesn't necessarily give you a principle.
Right.
And one of the things, well, you guys would know this, one of the things that Abbott and I wanted to pound into everybody's head was the fact is, learn the concept that what you're doing is dealing in relationships. Like that great web of the whole theoretical structure of art. Understand that the concepts understands how they relate to each other, understands that you can't just pull on one string without changing the whole web, because that is what will make you adaptable, that will make you go from being, he can draw pretty well, to, once he learns how to use this program, he can visualize something in whatever medium you give him. Because he understands, okay, I got 4 value fields. I got the dynamic field, I got the nil field, I got the subdued field, I got the neutral field. I can start anything with that piece of information and say, how do you want this picture to feel?
Right.
What's the story? WTF? What's it for? And I got to tell you, one of my favorite examples of that is, it came back, I met myself going the other direction, so to say. They needed somebody to teach a section of character design. Of course I said okay. Had I ever taught character design before? No. Did I understand the principles? Yes. Did I have anything extra added to it? The fact that I've been an actor, I make up characters all the time. Every time I get a new role, I'm creating a character. And if you think about it, the process for becoming a character in a play or in a film is exactly the same as creating a character, only you get actually change the guy's shape. I could be taller and blonde and good looking. Something which has been denied me all my life.
And now you know why most character designers in games make tall, blonde, beautiful looking.
Beautiful looking. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, we had an assignment going on. We had, like this Viking here. I have to admit, you've become incredibly Viking since that time.
Yeah, it's true.
And it's a positive thing. You fit right into Valor.
Embracing my heritage.
Yes,
for people who are
right.
listening and don't know, John has a full beard and long ponytail.
Yes, there he goes.
I don't know why I got tripped up because I wanted to say a full beard and sometimes glasses.
Thor does not wear glasses.
But Neil does, so it's all right. So anyway, I was teaching this class, and sketch out characters, blah 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 blah, and one of the star students comes in and she presents me with this layout, which is the same character, done dynamic field, nil field, neutral field, subdued field. Basically, use that idea of the percentage of what dark and light and where do you have the contrast to make the characters. I said, that is so cool, and it works for the character. Now all you have to do is decide which one do I want it to be and stick color on top.
I wanted to take a moment to unpack something you said, because I think it was really smart, and I think if you just listen to the surface, the words, it might actually evade some people. You mentioned the grammar of art, right? Like the principles give you the grammar, and I think the word grammar is really important because people sometimes will take an instructor's advice and then become discouraged when it didn't work the way that they applied it. And the thing about grammar is that knowing good grammar doesn't make you write Shakespeare. Knowing good grammar doesn't make you a great author. It's just the rules that enable you to write. And so I don't know.
And it also enables you to say what you want to say. Right. And that's the important thing. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen a half a dozen examples of why the Oxford comma is important, because you change from something that makes sense into something which is mildly obscene just by whether or not you put a comma in. And that's the smallest aspect of grammar. But the idea that you understand how the structure of the language enables you to say the things you want to say.
Right.
Yeah.
So the idea that the tools of art work similarly to grammar works on language. Gives you a place to start from, but then there's still a lot of work to do after that point, right? Like it kind of gives you a starting point, and then all the big work has to be done later on.
But whereas grammar is a completely arbitrary system made up by people, art is a universal language.
And the nice, well, what your point is absolutely amplified, Adam, and that you have great complexity and variation in grammar in different languages, but the complexity and variation of the grammar in visual arts, for instance, that's universal. And what's more is, I think it has cognates and it has similarities with the grammar of other ways of expression. Musical grammar, if you like, of composition works in that. I currently have a student whose mother is a writer, and so she comes along and brings her daughter, and we set to work drawing. And because she's also interested in learning teaching, because she's a teacher as well as a writer, I sometimes say, okay, now here's the point that we're covering today. And this is how that relates to what you do in writing. Because I only want to be the 21st century Renaissance man, so I write as well and compose music and write songs and all that kind of stuff.
I do too, and that's why when something's not working in art, I just switch over to music, and I feel a lot better.
Oh, absolutely. And here's the thing: it'll help you sort it out. It'll help you sort it out. Because what are the kind of problems that you get in music? Well, it could be in the wrong key. That's a literal cognate. I mean, we talk about key, and we talk about key in music. We talk about key in art, right? It could be in the wrong key. It could have the wrong. It could be a minor key when it wants to be a major key. In other words, it could have the wrong value set. It can have the wrong palette. We talk about coloring in music as well. It's exactly the same kind of thing.
Timbre, you can have a note that sounds good, but the timbre is wrong. The texture of it is wrong. And a similar thing happens in art where you get the right value, and even the right hue, but the saturation is a little weird, and it feels too intense or not intense enough.
Yes, exactly. And here's another thing, which is why I try to convince beginning students very early on, you don't want to develop a style. Because style is the wrong word.
Yeah, right.
Right, because a style is a matter of periodicity. Okay, they draw in a manner that's like Art Nouveau, or they draw in a manner that's like a Renaissance, or they draw in a manner like the Victorian bourgeois naturalism, right? So you've got this. The style can be anything. So here I am, I'm a singer and an actor. So I'm trying out for a part in a musical comedy. Okay? So I go in there, and what you do when you do an audition, you go in and you sing something, and you choose your own song. Right? So you go in,
I have nothing but time.
and you have no idea. You have no idea what the style of the musical is going to be. And so the first person comes in, and he's got something that's a country song. And he takes out his guitar and he sings. The next person comes in and he's a bit of a jazz buff, so he puts down the sheet music for the captive pianist, and he sings a little bit of club music, jazz. Somebody else comes in and maybe they're an operatic tenor, they sing that. Well, the fact of the matter is, I can sing jazz, I can sing country, I can sing rock and roll. So I'll pick whatever that is, because the guy's not listening to the style. He's listening to your voice. And although you can expand the range of your voice, you can adjust your diction and that kind of stuff, you can't change what you sound like. And the fact is that it doesn't matter, even if you're trying to draw like a Disney artist, unless you get sucked into that stuff too much, you will end up drawing like yourself.
Yeah. So you think there's an innate personality to your work that comes out?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it's partially who what artists that you've seen influence you. Partially is the size of your hands and the way the joints of your wrist and your shoulder and your elbow
If you're
work.
using Photoshop, it's the way you've learned over the years to use the tools, because I used it differently than the person who sits next to me.
Oh, absolutely, and again, any computer program, it's just a tool,
Absolutely.
The paintbrush that's in your hand is the same paintbrush anybody else is going to use, but it's what you choose to do with it, and all of the other things. But it's essentially what you choose to do with it. And there's a number of other things that go with that. Remember the whole 6 ways of starting a drawing?
Yeah,
idea,
scattergun is the one
scattergun, parameter
scanning,
first.
starting with the one piece and then moving it.
Yes, scanning.
I found the most important one is just lift the pencil and just look at the page and think for a sec. Just stop and think for a sec. You're not going to be a genius right away. Just think for just a second.
Yes, and then make a mark. Because until there's a mark there, there's
you
nothing.
don't know what to compare to.
And everything else is relative. So you have to have a starting point to work on. Okay, now I'm going to draw down here, and this is how I do my parameter first. Or, okay, I like that shadow. Or smudge, or whatever it is. Yeah. And so there's a natural inclination to what, and as you say, you look at the thing and say, okay, what am I drawing here? What do I want to say about it? Whether it's something that you're making up, or something you want to express, or from a photograph, or from your observation, whatever it is, you say, okay, what is it? In the first instance, if you're drawing from observation, what is it that I really want to look at? What is it I got to get down? And that becomes what the picture's about. And it really doesn't matter what the subject matter is. The picture's about this aspect that I want to draw.
Yeah, I think I've heard this before, and I forget where, but it really resonated with me. That is that people should focus on the fundamentals first, and the style will come later. Like your style is something that will come out whether you want it to or not. Because, like you said, it's kind of well, it was me paraphrasing it, but it's like an innate part of your artist personality. It'll emerge whether you want it to or not.
I mean, my singing voice and my speaking voice is what it is because of the bone structure in my face and how big my sinuses are and how long my face is and what my larynx is. And your drawing voice is about how long your forearm is. How loose
and how
is
you
your
perceive the world, I think, to a certain extent.
And that,
Well, I think there's an analogy to be drawn between the physical structures of your body and the physical structures of your mind that have developed over time. Maybe that's a stretch, but that's definitely how I see it.
I don't think it's a stretch.
It just depends on whether you adopt a materialistic view.
And that takes us right the way back to modified Bloom's taxonomy of learning. Okay?
No, I'm out.
I'm having flashbacks. I can't get out.
I'm sweating, and I don't think it's the beer.
Well, okay, it won't be too painful. I won't actually ask you to memorize it.
The ironic thing about that was that it's one of those things where even though it stresses the importance of learning to learn, you don't know how important it is until you've learned a bunch of other stuff also.
Which is what I told you when I said you won't understand this until later, but what I'm giving you is a map to your learning process.
And it's very much like being a parent in the sense that when you're a teenager and your parent punishes you, you're like, they're just assholes. But then you grow up and you're like, man, they knew what it was all about. Especially when you yourself have kids and learn how shitty they are.
You
make all the same mistakes again.
So
anyway.
So here's the thing. 3 areas of learning: psychomotor. That has its impact because, as I say, it's literally how you hold the pencil, how long your arm is. Psychomotor learning is in there. Cognitive to a certain extent because, that's one of the things that guides your approach to it. You say, okay, stop a minute. Nobody's a genius at once.
Yeah.
So stop. Look at the blank page. Think about what you're going to do. That think about is essentially grabbing hold of all of the things you remember that you've learned. If theory is everything you know about art, the next step is the strategy, where you say, okay, how am I going to approach this drawing that I'm going to do? The tactics is partially in the handwriting. But what's the one
effective, right? Is the next
effective?
one.
That's the you remember.
Yeah. I remember the big categories. The other ones are a little.
It's the effective learning.
Road isn't one of those categories.
It's the effect.
I see you took to that.
Habit. Also, you took that class so many times, though. I don't know if you're gonna.
At the end, we weren't even really using this taxonomy.
So it's interesting that you mentioned this because I can let you tie up your.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is, so the middle one, it's the effective learning, is the thing which drags you along. It's the engine which powers all the rest. It's the experiences that you get, right? That's the one where you've got value, where you say, okay, I want this learning because I want this learning. Not because it'll get me a good job, but because knowing more is better for me, and all of that kind of feeling about that's exactly, I think, what you were talking about, Adam, when you're saying your experience and your own mindset and all that you bring to the drawing.
Yeah.
That also creates your voice, that also creates your style, and it's that set of experiences that you have. And the realization, that everything I'm doing is just adding to a great body of knowledge and experience and skills. Because you got to have all three of those. Be any kind of an artist, you got to have all three. And I think you were spot on when you said that, your own mindset, your own frame of mind, your own experience, the things that you value all appear in your art, because that's the thing which is making you the artist. That's the thing that's making you learn.
At the same time, hearing you describe it like that made me realize a lot of that stuff you want to let go of too, because when I came into DigiPen, I had a lot of bad habits that I had picked up throughout the years, and I wasn't very good at drawing from observation.
There's a difference between the bad habits you have in relationship to the fundamentals of observation and your experiences and how they flavor the work. Right.
And I'm talking more about the knowledge base that you have built up by the time you reach college.
The things
might
you've
not
learned by
necessarily.
repetition.
There was a lovely Peanuts cartoon where Lucy is talking to Linus about something, and Charlie Brown comments in the last frame, "I feel so sorry for Linus, because when he gets to school, he'll have to unlearn all the things that Lucy's taught him." And trust me, I'm sitting there looking at portfolios and sketchbooks from students who are applying to come in and do the BFA, and I think, oh, I'm so sorry.
I honestly don't know why DigiPen accepted me when I go back and look at what I submitted.
They accepted you for the same reason they accepted a lot of other students, probably. Is that they need students to come to the school.
I'm glad they did. I learned a lot. And
they also believe in the mission of teaching people and actually developing their skills.
I just wonder if there was something about it that they saw that could be improved.
I don't remember if this was from the outset. I don't know if you looked at the portfolios immediately, but I remember you telling me one time later on that you looked at these portfolios that people would submit, and even if their art wasn't up to par, but you saw like that little nugget of something there, you would send them a sort of a test assignment and resubmit. You would ask them to resubmit after completing the assignment. And that would be like the great test. Like, first of all, would they even do it?
Yeah, would they even do it? Because if they didn't care enough to do it, then you didn't want them there for sure. Right. But if they did it and they responded to the instructions of the assignment, the test, I want you to do a drawing like this and think about these things, or do a drawing in this way, go. Because very often, the stuff that you're asked to do in high school is not in any way going to be applicable to what you're going to be learning there. So there's nothing to look at that will give me or any other reviewer a clue about whether or not you'll be successful in the course.
Right.
Now-
It's kind of the same reason why you don't want to have just a bunch of generic crates in your portfolio when you're applying to jobs. You
Yeah.
kind of see that same thread.
Yeah. I mean, you gotta have some crates because they're going to. Although I don't know if they do crates anymore. They've probably got much nicer
I
modeling.
mean, you'll make crates, but they just figure that if you can make a really kick-ass hero prop, you can probably handle a crate.
Yeah, this
That's
is
it,
true.
yeah.
This is true. Well,
Yeah.
but the thing is that it was always a tipping point. Or the first thing I was looking for is, does this person have any idea what drawing from observation is? I mean, is she actually trying to draw the real world? Or is she just doing what every other manga artist has done, only very badly because they don't understand things like anatomy, I mean, I always find it very interesting that there's a sort of level of, I mean, obviously there's a level of ability and skill and things like that in manga drawing or in drawing for anime, and part of it is, are you thinking about anatomy?
Or are you just copying? And
Are
a
you
lot
just
of times it tends to
because
be
it's so
copying.
stylized? It's so stylized.
So I also think that the whole process of assessing drawings or assessing the portfolio is really interesting to me because when you look at a drawing, it's almost like you're a mind reader. Especially the more amateur levels of artwork, you can really see them thinking about every area and sort of carving it out. So you can tell if they're copying something or if they're not, or you can tell if they're actually like trying to utilize principles of solid drawing even though they don't know what it is really.
Right, and you might even, like, I haven't really had this experience, but I imagine you might even be able to see them making the same mistakes that you were at that point
totally.
in your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, and the same mistakes I still make, they just make more grievous versions.
Yeah.
Of it. Yeah, it's all the same mistakes, really.
Well, it's interesting what you said before about how the theoretical basis, the purpose of art knowledge being like a continual fabric, and you can't choose and pull on pieces without affecting the whole thing. In my experience, this is demonstrably so, because one of the regular assignments, of course, in Art 101 was the teapot assignment,
Yeah.
which I was given in my MFA course. Right?
So you also replicate assignments.
It is.
Don't feel bad about stealing all
Oh
of
no,
yours.
no, no! It is the assignment, and here's the difference. I gave you guys a week. I had to do it overnight,
Yeah.
and the expectations were much higher.
Yeah.
Because here's the thing: the problems are always the same problems. The process is always the same process. What changes is experience. What changes is skill level, because you just do it more. If you draw long enough, you'll eventually get control over the pencil or the pen. What changes is your understanding of what it is that you want to say. What part of this thing is important? All of that sort of stuff. But the problems are always just the same.
Yeah.
The problem is, if I may quote me, down to
I don't know, does DigiPen own that property? Sorry.
No, this never belonged to DigiPen. It was always mine. That was but one of their mistakes. Was the idea that they owned the intellectual property of their instructors. Which is never going to happen.
AI does.
There's a reason that I'm a professor.
Yeah.
Is I
You
profess.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
However, go back to quote me. Any fool can make a drawing of a dragon interesting, because dragons are in themselves interesting. If you can take a pile of Becker boxes and make that interesting, that's art. Right? And the more you do that, the better your chances of making it interesting. And you don't have to create vampire boxes to do it. You don't have to change the subject. You don't have to cheat in any way. Because what is it that changes? Well, your fluency. Okay. You don't make simple mistakes like your perspective is bad. Your understanding of spatial relationships is better. So you draw solid, you draw form. Your use of negative spaces is as important as the shades, because you come to understand that you're never drawing a box. You can't draw a box. you can't draw anything. All you can draw is marks on a flat surface, right? And what you do is you end up saying that if I have these patterns of edges and gaps and volume and value and point, line, shape, value, texture pattern, maybe color, it will look like the thing. But more than that, if the viewer is able to see the hand of the artist in what is done, not just the subject, but the hand of the artist, if you invite the viewer to see the drawing and know the subject, they see the subject through your drawing. It's much more interesting than just a photograph or having a pile of boxes in front of them, that's for sure. Right?
You guys are good, yeah.
Then there's all of the choices of value and lighting and where you frame it and which part's closest and which part, all of that stuff that you as the artist have complete control of. Right? That can make a pile of anything interesting, right?
There's a tendency.
And then think what happens you turn this guy loose on a dragon.
So there's it's a microphone.
Oh, that's cool. Am I interrupting something?
No, I mean everybody.
No, that's right. Everything is editable.
So there's two things that occurred to me when you were talking. One was I was having a flashback to our the class where you gave the project, the final project where we all built a city together, and we had
I forgot about that.
we had proposals and everyone put their drawings up, and there was like 3 that ended up being in the final vote, right? Everyone voted, and one of them was mine, and I remember taking the time and consideration to plot out like the perspective and make sure everything had good, fundamental, solid drawing as best as I could manage. And you, after the pieces had been selected, you said, can you find something that all of these pieces share in common? And the thing that you wanted to highlight was that the ones that were selected were also the ones that had the most rigorous attention to solid drawing, to good drawing. And so even though you want to focus on the idea, it's important. The idea is important. Oftentimes the idea won't come across without the solid drawing, and people just respond well to good drawing. So I was hearing you talk about that, and I was just remembering that you had said something very similar to us.
Well, of late, I've gone so far as, start stealing from other sources and say, it's the form, stupid. You think about this. One of the, as I said, I taught this class, Art 110, which is about visual perception and design process, artistic process. In other words, how we receive messages and understanding through our eyes. How does that work? Which is another way of saying, how do pictures work? Whether they're photographs or drawings or something on the screen, a 3D model or whatever it is. How does this process work? And then how does that feed into the making of images, right? The telling of stories through pictures. And one of the things I did, of course, always have the slideshow, the PowerPoint, with a series of pictures of Madonnas. Well, they weren't strictly Madonnas; they were women with children. So you got the Russian Orthodox icon, you got the medieval picture, you've got the Renaissance picture, you've got Marie Cassatt's mother washing the feet of her baby, and all of these things. There was even a Persian miniature in there. They're all the same subject. They're all the same subject. They're all totally different. And the way that you respond to the picture has nothing to do with the subject. The subject, in fact, is irrelevant.
It's like you're responding to the artist.
You're responding to the artist, you're responding to the form of the picture. And it's down to things like how big is the figure in the frame, how close is the figure, how far away, how formal the composition, how many diagonals it's got, all of that abstract stuff.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, carry on.
It's just that would be, in a nutshell, the difference between what makes art interesting versus blah. The subject doesn't matter.
No.
Not even the slightest. What matters is what you're trying to say about the subject.
I do find, though, that
Yes.
with
And if you got the WTF and then you produce it, if you make that, if you pay off, that's when all the magic happens.
I do find though that outside of like the people outside of the art world looking in, enjoying visual media, they tend to care what the subject is because we tend, as artists, we tend to be a little up in the clouds, and we care a lot about other artists, and so we want to be involved in the process. But I have noticed that people will, like, people create libraries and binders of poorly drawn orcs because they like orcs. You know what I mean? Because they think that the idea of orcs are cool. So there is a counter side to this.
What's his name? Kincaid made a whole career out of producing really crap art.
Maybe that's work we don't care about because we're being honest with ourselves about the type of work we like. No, the light. You mean the light, my friend.
Yeah. Yes,
he didn't paint in colors. He painted his light.
No.
At the same time, a lot of those people can tell the difference between good art and bad art. They just don't really care.
They don't really care. Yeah, and that's fair enough. I remember back in the UK when I was a student there, they had a whole lecture series that was presented by a fellow on kitsch and bad art.
Yeah.
And what is the place of kitsch and bad art? And he's teaching this art student.
Is folk art a part of that, or is it something separate altogether?
It kind of was kind of on the periphery, and is basically popular art. And what are you going to do about it? And I think, he was a good member of the Labour Party. He's a socialist and a graduate of Oxford. But he made a valid point, is that this stuff is there, and people like it, and it's what they want, and you can't fault them for that.
So it's
not like they're wrong, but it's not like
are they?
It goes like this. It's not that they're wrong in the same way that a kid isn't wrong wanting a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. But you hope that at some point during your life you're going to introduce them to bouillabaisse, or maybe just even, look, try this asparagus.
Right. It's like, in one day I put away childish things. Like, even the Bible has that.
And that's fair enough. Although, against that, I would just like to hold out that, if you don't grow up by the time you're 32, you don't have to.
1 year left.
Hang in there, John. Hang in there. As you notice, I managed to get past that deadline with no trouble.
So actually, I don't want to send us too far off the beaten path, but you did raise a question in my mind, which is that, in talking about the difference between art that shows the hand of the artist and that is expressive, and art that shows the subject and is representational, and which one is preferable, or it's not preferable, it's I raised the point, sorry, I'm trying to retrace my steps here. I raised the point that that it tends to be the outside world, outside art, looking in, they tend to like the more representational stuff, or they like things that remind them of something that they like. And you brought up kitsch art and said, is it wrong to like this stuff? So what it raised in my mind is it actually comes down to a question of philosophy more than a question of art, which is that, is there an objective meaning to good art that we can, as an authority on art, say this doesn't qualify and that does? Or is one person's opinion just as legitimate as another's, but solely because it is an opinion and art is a human experience? Like, it kind of comes back to the question of, it has echoes of a question of objective morality, relativism versus objectivism, and I'm wondering where you land on that. That's a big, heavy question.
Really huge question. But don't worry.
Okay.
It does not daunt me at all.
Okay.
Here's the thing. Because you mentioned this, I'm going to snag onto something. You have a question which almost has religious overtones.
Yeah.
All right?
Oh, we're really getting into it.
and here's an observation that I make. Is what my faith is irrelevant if I'm talking to you about what you believe. What I believe is irrelevant. The question is, what do you believe, and how does that make your life better? How does that form and how does that educate your relationship with the world?
Yeah.
You know, does it make you a kinder person? Does it make you more thoughtful? Does it make you more aware? Does it make you enjoy life better? Or does it make you an obnoxious, bigoted, homophobic, misogynic dick?
Yeah.
You know, and gee,
A little column A, a little.
yeah, you know, exactly. And there isn't a right answer to that question. There isn't a right answer to that question. There are, I think, however, you know, so I always say that the artist's principal question, the first question is WTF? What's it for? You know, what am I trying to do? Am I trying to raise mankind to a higher sphere? Well, good luck to you. It's going to be hard to do anyway, and with visual art, it's going to be kind of different. But if you go and you look at the Sistine Chapel ceiling, and you don't have to be a Catholic to do that, but you're likely to say, holy crap, that is really, really cool.
My life is better, and I may be an atheist.
Yeah, you know,
My life is better.
exactly. You know, exactly. Or you know, I love Gothic architecture.
Yeah.
You can't get past the fact that those people did what they did inordinately, just phenomenally well, right? And you don't have to be a Christian. You don't have to be anything. You can be an atheist, and you still say, "Gosh, this is a good building. I really like it in here." You know, all of that's true. Now, the fact of the matter is, you know, do you like listening to ad jingles? Well, if they're clever enough, that's fine.
Yeah.
Would I rather that you listen to Mozart? No, I just don't want you to reject Mozart because you say ad jingles or this hip hop number or whatever it happens to be speaks to me. Well, fine, it speaks to you. And that's something else speak to you too.
Yeah, and I suppose there is this other idea that could work very nicely, play very nicely with this idea is that now that we have so many people on the planet, you don't need to please everybody.
No.
There can be, you know, 90% of the population could love ad jingles, and you still have enough for a good party, at least, right? Like a very, very good party.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now, we will now cover up the microphone because I'm going to tell you something that we don't want non-artists to know. Okay. What you say about the fact that you're not necessarily your average consumer, but an awful lot of consumers of art, the ones that have their portfolios filled with cut-out pictures of badly drawn orcs, right? What they don't know is that they may be looking at art because they like orcs, but because we're artists, we can make them feel the way we want to about the orcs. And when you get somebody who's a really good artist, who does a phenomenal picture about orcs, of an orc, the thing is that whether they want to or not, they're going to say, and this is the best one. This one is the orkiest orc that ever was, you know. This guy just make me wet myself every time I look at him.
But it won't be because he has tusks or not has tusks. It'll be the way, the whole treatment.
The whole thing, right. And it won't be necessarily because you see the hand of the artist. It won't be because, you know, but what the hand of the artist will do will so imbue this orc with energy and dynamic and drama and force. They say, yeah, now that is the boss art.
Yeah.
It's funny that we're talking about orcs because I had this exact experience growing up with the people that I played Magic cards with. The people who didn't have an artistic bone in their body, but they always recognized like the artists they get for this card game are really good because Wizards of the Coast has this really high standard for artists. Well, they didn't used to, but they do now.
Well, and depending on the time, like they actually, the quality of artists that company had grew along with the fantasy art.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
The demand for fantasy art
Yeah.
grew in that
and
company.
as the popularity of the card game grew, suddenly they had a budget where they could hire better and better
Like
artists and become selective.
Magic the Gathering has always been a step ahead of like the Dungeons and Dragons manuals,
Yeah.
right? It's always been, and then everyone is just looking back at Frazetta and wondering how.
Of course, that's because they started in Seattle.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's fair to ask a heavy question like that.
Yeah.
Because in
I'm
fact,
just curious because I feel like some people feel like there's obviously a continuum. Like some people feel like good art is and music too. Music is, I think, an area we all experience this in first because everyone draws the lines between genres at a very young age, right? I like this, I don't like that. It's like, how objective can you really be? How bad is the music you dislike really? Is it bad? Is it a little bad? Is it a lot bad? What are people missing if they don't like the stuff that inspires you? And a lot of people that are very informed come to the conclusion that it's all 100% relative because they can't really hold on to any one point at all. And I'm kind of, I'm like, not quite aligned with that perspective, but I haven't really put my flag
what about
down
a drummer
yet,
that can't hold a beat, or a guitarist that isn't very good?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like
some things aren't 100% objective, I would argue.
Yeah, and is it always taste? Are you satisfied with saying that, oh, this person likes that and that's fine for them, and this person likes that and that's fine for them? I would say, I guess it depends on what you're looking for and your values about the medium.
yeah, well, here's the thing. I think there's a world of difference between taste and quality.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, your taste is what it is, but as you said, your friends looking at the cards could tell who were the better artists and not.
Right.
Now, their taste was directed towards fantasy art, but they could make judgments. And the whole thing about getting an art education is that you get better at making those judgments.
Yeah, which is
because along the lines, not only do you know what's better, you know why it's better.
Yeah.
And then you get to the point where you say, how the heck did they do that? Because I want to do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Like this, please consider subscribing to Games. Also, if there's a person or topic you'd like to see covered in the conversation, shoot me a tweet or leave a comment below. Thanks for watching.